Hey guys, today we are in my kitchen. I just got back from a very cold cross-country ski trip, and I'm going to be doing some of the things that I do to get my gear ready for storage. I do not have anything planned, so it's about 3 weeks that I'll have my gear kind of stored, probably, unless I plan something. Sometimes I just plan random stuff, but I'm thinking planned right now, so I'm going to get my stuff ready for storage, and I wanted to show you what that process looks like. So one of the first things that I attend to is my water filter. So I took my Sawyer on this trip, and we have really cold water in Montana, so I like to back flush it. And what I'll do, since we have really hard water, is I'll use some vinegar to back flush with. And I like to use 2 cups because I like to see if stuff is kind of coming out of it, and that gives me a little bit of a gauge. I also do bleach mine sometimes. Just depends on how long I used it for, depends on what type of water I used it in, if it was murky water or something. Pour out that dirty water. Redo the vinegar. And I just kind of go with a splash. I just kind of guesstimate. And then I'll put enough water so that I can fully submerge my water filter. And I'm just gonna make sure that it's fully submerged for a while, and then I'm just gonna let it sit in there. Next up, I've got my clean water bladder. I have an Osprey one. I actually need to send this one in for warranty because it has a little hole in it. I tried to patch it. It did work. I patched it with some gear tape, and it did work for this trip. It didn't leak out, thankfully, but I am gonna try to warrant it because it's a Hydropax one. So in the meantime, I will be making sure it gets dry. So looking at my hose, it's not super wet. There's some up here, so I'll definitely want to get that out of the little mouthpiece as good as I can. Kind of dry that, and then I'll set it separately to dry. And then this is now just like an empty hose, so I can kind of fling it around a little bit and try to disperse the water so that it dries. And sometimes I put them over by my fireplace if they're really wet to dry better, so that does help. This one's pretty dry, so I don't need that because I wasn't able to actually use my hose because it was so cold on this trip that we went on, and we found out after the fact that it was like -20 out in the woods this weekend, so that would explain why I was freezing my butt off all weekend, so that was fun. I mean, I was fine. I had good layers and everything, so I was honestly fine, but I just was colder than I expected to be because I thought it was going to be probably at least 10 above 0, and it ended up being way below 0, so that was kind of exciting. But that's why it pays to be prepared, because even though I was definitely chilly, I was fine. Like, I did not worry that I was gonna have frostbite or anything crazy like that. I did not worry about hypothermia. I was fine. I just noticed that it was really cold, but I think at those temperatures, you pretty much are gonna be somewhat cold no matter what you do, because at minimum, some part of you is gonna be exposed, usually, unless you are got goggles or something like that. So same thing with this. And a lot of times what I like to do, so I have these really simple cotton towels that are kind of an old style, and I like to just shove them inside of my bag and let them sit for a little bit to let it dry. That's one of my favorite methods, and it lets it dry out really easily. It kind of holds it open a little bit, lets some airflow get in there, and then I'll just set it out in my kitchen where it's a little bit warmer. Okay, so this next one's pretty obvious, but it is my cooking stuff. So I was a little bougie on this trip and I brought my tea kettle and my little pot because I was going to use my pot as my cup for some hot beverages because it was cold. I expected it to be cold. So I took both with me. So now both of them need washed. So I'll clean off the outside of my little MSR stove thing. And that's because I do live in bear country and recreate a ton in bear country. So I always use something that is like similar to Pine Sol or something like that. So this one's just a mean green antibacterial, but it's like that lemon scented type of one. And I guess they don't like Pine Sol and stuff like that. Pine Sol and Lysol are the things that bears supposedly don't really like. So I usually try to use a cleaner like that, and I'll just sort of spray it a little bit. I just like to minimize all of the risks that I can when it comes to bears because that makes sense to me to do. And then I'll just usually wipe the inside of this, my pot cozy, and then I'll wash my pot. So I'm gonna wash that up along with my pot and my lids. And the same thing with my little pot stand. Give that a nice little clean, and then those are good to go. And then we're just gonna wash with some mild soap the rest of it. And I do clean stuff when I'm out in the field. It's just that I feel like I can do usually a more thorough job when I get home. So even if I clean stuff out in the field, I still do it again when I get home. Cooking stuff is all clean and ready to dry, and it's gonna be ready for my next trip. So let's see what's next. Before I go back and I touch my pack or I grab any other stuff out of it, I try to make sure that I am washing my hands so that I'm not accidentally contaminating anything with food smells. Now we're in my gear room getting ready to put away the last little bit of stuff. I actually do still have my tent because I didn't take it on this trip, but I didn't have time to put it away after my Arizona trip. So I need to get that put up because I don't store them compressed like they are in their bags. I take them out and let them be a little more free, kind of like my sleeping bag. But I grabbed my ground sheet and realized that it really needs to have some of the dirt shaken off of it. So I'm gonna do that real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, I have the dirt shaken off of that, so I just leave it partially folded and then I put it in my bin. Next, I will grab my tent, and I'm actually gonna just take it out of its stuff bag. And I don't keep it tied up or anything because that puts extra stress on the fabric. So it's just gonna get kind of unrolled, but it'll get put in there. And then for my sleeping bag, sometimes, especially if it was compressed for a long trip, I may put it in the dryer on a tumble without heat to fluff the down back up. It wasn't in the bag long enough that I'm worried about that this time. This one's my Western Mountaineering bag. So I'm just gonna put it loosely in its net bag, and this is how I'm gonna store it hanging in my closet. So those are all the important things that I'm doing to make sure that my gear is going to be ready for its next trip. If you have questions or other gear that you're wondering about, what to do with it, how to make sure it's stored properly for your next trip, let me know in the comments. And in the meantime, check out my video on my Arizona adventure right here. And as always, happy trails!